Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Core Studio. Welcome to the show. So, on today's episode, I've got some really exciting tier rankings for you. That's right, we're going to be talking about the Phyrexian Praetors, and I want to specifically say Phyrexian Praetors because technically there are other older kinds of Praetors that aren't Phyrexian, and this episode is just on the Phyrexian Praetors. So yeah, if you go Scryfall, type Phyrexian, type Praetor. These are the ones that are going to pop up, and these are the ones I'm going to be ranking in the tier rankings because, yeah, we finally got the second Elish Norn, one that, well, there's some debate around apparently, and yeah, I thought it'd be a good time that we know that we have, two of each of the Phyrexian Praetors, well, except one of them. We'll talk about that here in a bit. Yeah, it'd be a fun time to just talk about, their power rankings, how do they stack up against each other? So, with these tier rankings, I will say that these are all done within a vacuum of the Phyrexian Praetors. So these are in comparison to each other. They're not comparison, to other commanders outside of the Phyrexian Praetors. This is just the Phyrexian Praetors. How do they stack up as commanders? And yeah, they can also be incredibly potent in the 99. In fact, in many cases, more potent in the 99. How do they stack up as commanders on this episode, though? With all that said, let's jump into it. And I will say that I'm going to be talking about these in kind of a random-ish order. I'm going to be talking about basically the older version of a card first, then the newer version. That's kind of the order, and just, yeah, the reason I picked the end of the order, is kind of just random, essentially. But yeah, we're going to be starting things off with Urabrask. Okay, this one might not have been so random. Maybe this one was kind of, in my head, kind of knew where Urabrask was going to be. Let's start with Urabrask the Hidden. Again, a 4/4 Praetor for 3. Red, 5 mana in total. Creatures you control have haste. Creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tap. So, yeah, you can swing with your creatures right away. Your opponents, can't. Even if they do have haste, they're going to be coming to play tap. So, yeah, that's worse for, their defense. Better for your offense. Overall, though, when it comes to comparing this to other Praetors, it's kind of lackluster. And yeah, Urabrask definitely has kind of gotten the short end of the stick sometimes. So, I'm very sorry, Urabrask the Hidden, but you are a D tier commander. You just are. You're in that D tier. You are nothing all that special. Again, I mean, compared to your, average commander, sure, you might be up in, maybe the C or the B tier, but compared to the Praetors, nowhere near it. Let's move on to the newer version of Urabrask, though, to see if Urabrask improved over the years. In Streets of New Capenna, a 4/4 Phyrexian Praetor for 3 red, exact same thing. Has haste. Very similar again, having haste. Now, at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn. So, impulse draw on your turn. Beginning of each opponent's upkeep, the next time they would draw a card this turn. Instead, they exile the top card of their library. They may play it this turn. So, basically, kind of turning your opponent's, first draw their turn into impulse draw instead. So, you get, additional draw for free, essentially, additional impulse draw for free. And your opponents, their first draw instead becomes impulse draw. So they have to use it or they lose it right away, essentially. So, yeah, I mean, again, not a terrible commander, one that is really not all that exciting. And again, many of these commanders, many of these Praetors, again, they have that, major upside for you, major downside for your opponent. And this is just like a okay upside. Here's a little bit of impulse draw. Great. One impulse draw. I mean, there are enchantments that cost less that do this too, essentially. And then this is also, hey, your opponents, I'm going to be really mean to you. That first one that you're drawing, you got to use it. Versus, if you basically said, all your opponent's draws turn into impulse draw, yeah, that would be brutal. And that would be, again, more kind of Praetor worthy. This, not so much. This more so is definitely going to be joining other Urabrask. Both iterations of Urabrask are D tier commanders, in my opinion. And I should say with this tier list, actually, I didn't actually just make a list ahead of time. This is going to be more organic. This is going to be more, yeah, I might move things around. I probably won't be moving around Urabrask or other Urabrask anytime soon, though. We shall see. Next up, let's move on to Shieldred Whispering 1, a 6/6 Praetor with Swamp Walk that costs 5 black, so 7 mana in total. Quite pricey. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. So again, when it comes to Praetors, right? Big upside for you, big downside for your opponent. This one is more on point with that, right? This one's, hey, you're paying a lot for this Praetor, 7 mana in total. You're getting a big benefit from it. Again, Reanimating a creature every single turn, that can be something absolutely massive. And of course, yeah, there are, certain ones you can really take advantage of. Be like a Sepulchral Primordial, right? You go get more of your opponent's creatures because you're making them sacrifice them. Maybe you've got a way to sacrifice your creatures yourself, so you can, take advantage of those. They have ETBs. And yeah, forcing your opponent to sacrifice a creature on their upkeep is a massive downside, one that can just wipe out their armies in no time while, again, you are building yours. So yeah, Shieldred, very potent. Again, a pretty pricey commander at 7 mana, though we'll see that there are other ones in this, that have even, a higher price tag. This one I will say, and again, with most of the Praetors, actually, it's kind of, again, the 99, sure, this can be an absolute bomb. As a commander, they do all kind of have, a slight downside on them because, they are monocolored, so, they don't have access to a ton of things. I mean, they've got access to a good amount, yes, but, they're not, multicolored commanders are going to have access to a swath of spells. But yeah, I mean, when you're in mono black, you're still going to have a lot of advantages. At this point, I'm going to be throwing Shieldred Whispering One into the B tier. I think it's a very solid commander. Not one of the best, but definitely a solid commander comes to the Praetors. Next up, the newest iteration of Shieldred the Apocalypse, a 4/5 Phyrexian Praetor with Death Touch that costs 2 black. Yeah, I'm not sure. Shieldred apparently is attached like a Phyrexian Dreadnought now. Somehow only costs 4 mana. It's just a 4/5, instead of a 12/12 or whatever, but new Shieldred. We're just going to go with it. Whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. So again, upside for you, downside for your opponents. This is the lowest to the ground Praetor that we've seen so far in this list. And yeah, I mean, you're getting a good amount of value for that. A 4/5 Death Toucher. Nice, but also, yeah, whenever you're drawing cards, which of course you're going to want to do, and when you're in mono black, you've got plenty of efficient and effective ways to draw, some of which might cost you life, but again, when you're gaining life instead, you're either going to balance that out or even net life as it is. And of course, your opponents want to draw cards as well. That's just kind of, what you want to do, and especially in a game of Commander, yeah, now they're going to be punished for that too. So of course, yeah, you've got ways to force your opponents to draw. You've got ways to take them out really quickly. And yeah, this is just a commander that I think is really potent. Again, lower to the ground than a lot of the Praetors. And I'm actually going to put this brand new Shieldred into the A tier, actually. So this brand new Shieldred, this new iteration, I think is more potent than the older one. Yeah, if they had, more comparable mana values, maybe things would be different. They do not. This one is lower to the ground. So yeah, Shieldred the Apocalypse, you are, in my opinion, in comparison to the other Praetors, an A tier commander. Next up, though, let's move on to jin-gitaxias with the original one, Core Augur. 5/4 flash 4. Here we go. 8 blue. 10 mana in total. Twice as much as an Urzabrask. Goodness, I can't even say it. Urabrask. Sorry, Urabrask. Yeah, I'm very sorry. I can't even get your name right. Anyways, jin-gitaxias. Flash at the beginning of your end step. Draw 7 cards. Each one's maximum hand size is reduced by 7. Oh my goodness. Okay, yeah, this is a game-ending commander at flash speed. Obviously, the kind of, one downside to it, obviously, is that, well, it costs 10 mana. So, yeah, your opponents are probably going to try to prep for it, and yeah, probably try to take you out because you're playing jin-gitaxias. Yeah, I mean, again, if you can get it out, if you can get the stick, you're in blue, so you can obviously, if you've got more mana, hope some counter spells or whatnot to ensure that it stays around. You're going to be drawing a ton of cards, refilling your hand even more so, and your opponents aren't going to have hands, and when that happens, that's basically game over. I mean, they're going to be top decking, hoping they can hit stuff. You're going to have plenty of counter spells and ways to protect your, your commander to ensure that you win. Yeah, if it wasn't for the mana value being so high, this would definitely be the tippy top. It is not, though. I, at this point, am going to have jin-gitaxias, Core Augur, join Shieldred Whispering One, not Whispering One, the Apocalypse in the A tier. And then we've got new jin-gitaxias, Progress Tyrant from Kamigawa, a 5/5 Phyrexian Praetor for 5 blue. So, still costly at 7 mana, but, less costly. So, yeah, Shieldred's amount, but nowhere near the original jin-gitaxias. Whenever you cast an artifact, instant sorcery spell, copy that spell, choose an target to the copy, but it triggers only once each turn. Whenever opponent casts an artifact, instant sorcery spell, counter that spell's ability only triggers once each turn. So, yeah, only triggering once each turn. I mean, yeah, that is a limitation, but this is one that definitely needs a limitation like that because, hey, you're doubling up, any time, a singular spell on a turn, I should say. Artifact, instant, or sorcery. Again, that applies to your opponent's turns as well, though. So, yeah, if you're casting an instant into your opponent's turns, that's doubling each and every single one of those, which is insane. And yeah, just even on your turn, you're in blue. You've got access to extra turn spells. Sure, I'll cast 1 and take 2 extra turns. or cast, one of those extra turn spells that get you 2 extra turns. I guess there's only really 1 time stretch, right? But yeah, and I'll get, more than that. I'll get 4. Or I guess there's more than that, right? There's plenty of other extra turn spells. Regardless, yeah, if you're building this to be the most brutal version of itself, I think this is definitely an S tier commander because, yeah, extra turns, also, protection for your spells, essentially, again, countering your opponent's spells, even if you're not just protecting your spell, but yeah, just your opponent on their turn being hampered by having to cast a spell to get that countered so they can cast the spell they actually want to cast. So yeah, a lot of card disadvantage to your opponents, a lot of, extra advantages for you. Jin-Gitaxias, Progress Tyrant, I am putting you up at the S tier. Yeah, you're 7 mana, but my goodness, are you a powerful commander and one that can be incredibly brutal. Next up, speaking of brutal, Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger, 7/6 Trampling Praetor that costs 6 green. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land produced. When an opponent taps a land for mana, that land doesn't untap during its Taurus Dex untap step. Yeah, 8 mana is a lot. I mean, it's not original Jin-Gitaxias mana, but still, 8 is a lot of mana. That being said, you are incentivized to ramp with this commander. You're incentivized to get a ton of lands into play already, because, yeah, you need to get your commander out, and once you do, you double up your mana, which is insane. So, yeah, I mean, on a commander, doubling up your mana, and even more insane is, oh my goodness, the absolute brutal back-breaking effect that forces your opponents essentially to, well, maybe skip some turns essentially in a way because, hey, they tap lands for mana. Those aren't going to untap, so you kind of have an opponent's resources. You have an opponent's turns in a way if they're, again, tapping out to do some things which they might have to in order to try to stop you when you have this in play. Yeah, this can be a very brutal commander. Yeah, I would say not quite up to Jin-Gitaxias levels, but I mean, maybe original one. So let's put that in A for now. Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger. Vorinclex, I always do that. Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger. Let's say you're an A tier commander. Moving on to the other Vorinclex, Monstrous Raider. A 6/6 Phyrexian Praetor, Trample and Haste, 4 green. If you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice the many of each of those counters on a permanent player instead. If an opponent would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, they put half that many of each of those kinds of counters on a permanent player instead. Rounded down. Yeah, I mean, pretty efficient, pretty effective, double up, counters in good ways for you most of the time, right? Those ++1 counters. There are some -1/-1 counter synergies that you can utilize on your opponents. Sure, I mean, Infect as well. Again, you are in mono, green. There are some Infect, cards out there in mono green. If you had access to more colors, it could be more impactful. Same thing when it comes to, Super Friends, Planeswalkers. You can, get ultimates with this right away, basically being a doubling season. And it can hamper your opponents that are playing certain strategies. That being said, it might also help an opponent. I mean, if they have, any kind of an undying creature or any kind of a persist creature, and they've got a free sacrifice outlet, which they might if, they're utilizing those kinds of cards, yeah, they can just go infinite with that kind of stuff. So there is, some potential downside to it as well. So yeah, sometimes not getting a counter on a permanent player is actually a bad thing. Most of the time it's going to be an upside. Vorinclex definitely can be built in a very powerful way. I lean toward Vorinclex, though, being a C tier commander. That's just kind of where my gut's going right now. Maybe that's just because there was an opening there, but we'll see if that switches, toward the end of this. But I'm gonna go C tier commander. We'll stick with it right now. Next up, we've got Elesh Norn Grand Cenobite, a 4/7 Praetor with Vigilance that costs 5 white. Other creatures you control get +2/+2. Creatures your opponents control get -2/-2. So a massive anthem for you, a massive downside for your opponents. There is kind of, one thing that really stands out with this commander, versus the other ones we talked about so far. And this one, well, is a mono white commander. Yeah, that's just it. That's just, part of the facts of life. This is a mono white commander. Mono white, I mean, yes, things have been improving lately. Mono white has gotten more cards to help it, catch up in some ways. But yeah, mono white, just in my opinion, is still behind the other colors. And therefore, just by playing mono white, you're kind of at a disadvantage, compared to the other ones where if you're playing, mono black, mono green, mono blue, definitely not at a disadvantage. So yeah, Elesh Norn obviously can make a massive impact when she comes into play. Can definitely, take out, small creatures your opponents have, can make your creatures massive. Still, there are other Praetors out there that are doing, more game-breaking, more ending things. And yeah, Elesh Norn, you're going to join a new Vorinclex in the C tier because of that. So you're down there in the C tier. Let's see if your new iteration, though, makes it out of the C tier. Elesh Norn, Mother of Machines. Apparently a problem. If you haven't seen my episode on Elesh Norn potentially getting banned, yeah, that was a surprise. Yeah, make sure you check that one out, though, and see the Rules Committee's thoughts on this. A 4/7 Phyrexian Praetor with Vigilance, that costs 4 and white. If a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability, a permanent you control a trigger, that ability triggers initial time. And permanents entering the battlefield don't cause abilities of permanents your opponents control to trigger. So, yeah, upside for you, this being, a Panharmonicon, essentially. Yeah, doubling up on all of your triggers. That includes, when your opponents have things come to play and that might trigger one of your things. That counts as well. And then also shutting your opponents down on their triggers. So kind of like, again, Panharmonicon / Torpor Orb in a way, but again, for all of their permanents. Now, yes, there are some powerful things that you can do with this. Again, you are in mono white, and again, therefore, you're just inherently kind of at a disadvantage. Doubling up on all of your ETBs can be a very powerful thing. It can give you just a ton of value throughout the game. But yeah, I mean, you're in mono white. I'm just gonna keep going back to that apparently. But yeah, and yes, there are plenty of permanents that this can shut down as well. That being said, unless you have a deck that's hyper focusing on ETBs. Yeah, I mean, you're probably going to be fine. This also, is going to, potentially help in some ways in certain circumstances. I mean, again, when it comes to, like I mentioned with Vorinclex, potentially be able to help in certain ways by, shutting down counters on your opponent's things. Shutting down some opponent's ETBs can actually help them in certain ways. I mean, like just bounce lands as an example. Hey, instead of this land bouncing a land back to my hand, I'm just basically getting a land that can tap for 2 into play without any downside to it, really. So, yeah, I mean, there are, again, yes, certain circumstances where, oh no, you shut down my ETBs. You probably should have some removal in your deck that isn't just ETB based to actually deal with this. Again, it's on a creature, something that can be dealt with. This one is, in my opinion, more powerful than other Elesh Norn. This is going to be, in my opinion, a B tier commander, joining original Shieldred, apparently. But yeah, I do not think it is problematic, like I said in that episode. I definitely do not think it should be banned. And I was very surprised to hear that it is in consideration. So yeah, if you haven't seen the episode, make sure you check it out. Now, we have gone through every single one of the original Praetors and their new iterations, but of course, and I kind of actually forgot that this was actually Phyrexian Praetor, Gix, Yawgmoth Praetor, a 3/3 that costs 1 black. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may pay 1 life. If they do, they draw a card. Pay 4 black, discard X cards, exile the top X cards, target opponent's library. May play lands and cast spells from among cards, exile this way paying their mana cost. Yeah, I mean, this can definitely do some pretty powerful things. It's kind of different, than the other Phyrexian Praetors, where, again, they're all, hey, one big upside for you, kind of the reverse of that as a downside for your opponents. This one's just like more like, no, everyone, go smack my opponents, which is nice. You do benefit other players when they do that, obviously. I mean, you benefit yourself by them draining themselves, though, too. And yeah, you're just getting all benefit, essentially, when you are doing it. But, yeah, draw a ton of cards. Eventually, Villainous Wealth, essentially, with that ultimate. And I love Villainous Wealth. Now, as much as I love that, this, Praetor, even though it is the lowest to the ground, when it comes to stacking up against the other Praetors, I kind of see it more as a C-tier commander, actually. So, definitely, sorry, Urbrask, neither of your iterations made it out of the D-tier, apparently. Did not move them. But yeah, Gix above those, not quite to level of other Praetors, though. And yeah, I'm looking at this kind of just as a whole now at this point. This, the S tier with the original, or the new Jin, with the A tier with new Shieldred, old Jin, old Vorinclex, B tier with old Shieldred, new Elesh Norn, C tier with new Vorinclex, old Elesh Norn, Gix, and then the D tier. And sorry again, both Urbrask, because yeah, I think this is, I think I'm pretty happy with this. I mean, there might be some slight adjustments that I would make if I had, kind of, put even more thought to it, just put days and days and days of thought into this of, hey, where does this go? What about this scenario? What about that? But, just kind of, making this on the fly. I very much enjoyed doing that. And yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with it. But yeah, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on this. What are your personal tier rankings for the Phyrexian Praetors? How would you, put them in tiers? And also, I guess, too, how would these rankings change based on, if you're doing Commander or if you're doing, them as a 99 piece, essentially, how would, their power levels differ based on that? So yeah. Let me know in the comments below. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.